Most people believe that intimacy is built by doing something special, saying the right thing or touching the right place. But almost no one stops to notice something much more important. Real intimacy begins before contact. It begins in the internal state from which you approach the other person. And this detail, which seems small, is what makes all the difference. Stay with me because today we're not going to talk about tricks or quick fixes. We're going to talk about how the human body really responds when it feels safe, understood, and accompanied. You'll understand why connection often doesn't happen even when there's attraction, why insisting usually pushes people further away rather than bringing them closer, and why the body, especially the female body, responds much more to calm than to intensity. And there's a very clear reason to stay until the end. When you understand this, your way of experiencing intimacy ceases to be a source of pressure and becomes a space of presence. Throughout my career working with sexual health, body regulation, and human behavior, I have seen a pattern repeat itself over and over again. People who believe they don't know how to connect, when in reality what is happening is that no one has explained to them how the nervous system works in intimate contexts. Because intimacy is not activated by isolated stimuli. It is activated when the body interprets that it is safe to let its guard down. And here is a fact that is little known outside the clinical setting. The brain does not process touch solely as a physical sensation. Processes it as a message. Every gesture, every approach, every pause communicates something. Communicates haste or patience, pressure or respect, expectation or presence. And the body responds to that message before the mind understands it. That's why, often, someone can touch the right places and still create distance. Because the problem isn't the place, it's the state from which the touch comes. The body perceives inconsistencies with surprising accuracy. It senses when there is anxiety behind the contact. It senses when there is an intention to get something. And when that happens, the nervous system activates in defense mode. Here I want you to ask yourself a simple but honest question. When you seek intimacy, are you trying to elicit a response, or are you willing to listen to the response that the other person's body gives you? Neuroscience tells us that there are areas of the body that are particularly sensitive because they are connected to nerves that regulate basic functions such as calmness, attachment, and trust. These are not magic zones. They are informative zones. Contact in these areas can send a message of security or invasion. It all depends on the rhythm, the intention, and the context. For example, areas near the neck, behind the ears, or in the lower back are not relevant because of their proximity to pleasure, but because of their connection to the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for deep relaxation. When that system is activated, the body opens up. When it is not, it protects itself. And here lies one of the biggest cultural misconceptions about intimacy. Believing that you have to stimulate for something to happen. In reality, what matters most is not interfering with the body's natural processes. Desire cannot be forced. Desire arises when there is no threat. Many people are surprised to discover that when they slow down, more happens. That when they lower the intensity, the connection increases. That when they stop trying to impress, the other person's body responds more easily. And this is no coincidence. It's physiology. The human body is designed to detect microsignals. Subtle changes in muscle tone, breathing, and movement speed. All of this is processed on an unconscious level. And when those signals indicate calmness and consistency, the body responds with openness. Something I often observe is that, over time, many people develop a greater sensitivity to this. Not because they have read more, but because they have learned, sometimes through mistakes, that intimacy is not conquered, it is allowed. And that understanding completely changes the experience. Let me share something important with you. Intimacy is not a test that you pass or fail. It is a dynamic process between two nervous systems. And when one of them is tense, the other perceives it. Always. That is why insisting when the other person's body does not respond not only does not help, but often reinforces the blockage. Not because there is a lack of desire, but because there is a lack of security. The body does not open up when it feels it has to perform. It opens up when it feels it can be. And here I want to make a fundamental clarification. Talking about this from a medical perspective does not mean making it cold or distant. On the contrary, it means understanding that respect for biological rhythms is one of the deepest forms of care. Because when you respect the body's rhythm, the body trusts. In consultation, many people express frustration because they feel that it used to be different. And it was. Not because the body has changed in a negative way, but because the internal context was different. Less pressure, fewer expectations, more presence. Over time, tensions, responsibilities, and fears accumulate. And the body responds to that by adjusting. If this resonates with you, I want to invite you not to take it as a personal criticism. No one taught us to understand intimacy from this perspective. Most of us were told about performance, results, and meeting expectations. Very little was said about regulation, listening, and real connection. Sexuality, we address precisely this gap. Not to point out mistakes, but to offer understanding. Because when you understand how the body works, you stop demanding things from it that it cannot give in certain contexts, and you begin to create the conditions for it to do so. Here's another interesting fact. The nervous system learns through repetition. If intimacy is experienced as pressure, the body learns to tense up. If it is experienced as presence, it learns to relax. That's why small, sustained changes in the way we approach intimacy can profoundly transform the experience over time. And no, it's not about doing less. It's about being more attentive to the signs, more aware of the rhythm, more willing to pause. Because often, a timely pause communicates more confidence than any gesture. If you've made it this far, this topic is probably touching you in some way. And I would like this space to be a place for real conversation, not just passive listening. That's why I invite you to answer a very simple question in the comments. Do you think that in intimacy we tend to listen more or demand more? Reading these answers helps us to understand each other better as a community. Throughout the channel, you'll find other videos where we delve deeper into how the nervous system, bodily presence, and emotional security directly influence our intimate lives. Watching them as a whole allows you to build a more complete, realistic, and much kinder view of yourself and others. Before closing, I want to leave you with an idea that sums up everything we've talked about. Intimacy isn't about finding exact points, but about creating safe contexts. The human body responds better to consistency than intensity, better to calm than urgency, better to presence than technique. If this content has brought you clarity, subscribing to Why Sexuality is an easy way to continue exploring these topics in depth, with respect and scientific basis. And if anything you heard today made you think, share it. Sometimes, changing the way we understand the body changes much more than we imagine. Now tell me in all honesty, when you think about intimacy, do you feel more pressure or more presence? I look forward to hearing from you.